Alright guys, so today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how to complete the square to solve quadratic functions. So this is actually one of the simpler ways to do it, as long as your b is even. Now you can do it, as we're going to see, with equations where b is not an even number. It is a little more difficult, but it is not that big of a deal. So let's go ahead and get started. So we have step-by-step instructions here where we can solve ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, where a does not equal 0, by completing the square. So step 1 tells us that if a does not equal 1, we're going to divide both sides of the equation by a. So our first equation here is x squared minus 5x minus 3 equals 0. Our a is 1. So we don't have to do any division here to start off. So let's go ahead and skip to step 2. It says rewrite the equation so the constant term is alone on one side of the equal sign. What that means is we are going to take our c value, that's the last term, in this case -3, and we are going to move it over to the other side of the equation. To do that, what we need to do is add 3 to both sides. And why do we do it to both sides? Well, because remember, anything we do to one side, we have to do to the other side. So we're left with x squared minus 5x equals 3. Step 3 says square half the coefficient of the x term and add the square to both sides of the equation. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our b, which is -5, and we're going to put it over 2, and we're going to square that. So this is why it's going to get complicated, is that if b is odd, we start dealing with fractions. So that's going to give me x squared minus 5x plus 25 over 4 equals 3 plus 25 over 4. Now we can't just add 25 over 4 and 3. We do need to have a common denominator. So if I want to put 3 over 4, I'm going to have to multiply my numerator by 4 as well. So I'm going to have 12 over 4 plus 25 over 4. And the other side is going to stay the same. X squared minus 5x plus 25 over 4. So 12 plus 25 is 37. So the equation we're going to move on to is x squared minus 5x plus 25 over 4 is equal to 37 over 4. So it said what we're going to do is we're going to factor the trinomial as a perfect square and combine terms on the other side. So we have our b term was -5 over 2. So that is going to be our other term in our factor. So it's going to be x minus 5 over 2, quantity squared, equals 37 over 4. All right, so our next step is to use the square root property to complete the solution. So first, we have our x minus 5 over 2, quantity squared, equals 37 over 4. We need to take the square root of both sides. So that gives me x minus 5 over 2 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 37 over 2. And then all I have to do is go ahead and add 5 over 2 to both sides. And we're going to end up with x is equal to 5 plus or minus the square root of 37, all of that over 2. And let me make it to where you can see that. All over 2. All right, so that's what happens when our b is not even. We end up with a crazy little fraction. So let's go ahead and do another example. And again, b is not even on this one, so it's going to take a few minutes. So our problem now is 2x squared plus x minus 6 equals 0. So again, the first step is to divide everything by a, and in this case, a is 2. So we're going to divide everything by 2. And that's going to give me x squared plus 1/2 x minus 3 equals 0. So step 2, we're going to rewrite it so that we can move our minus 3 over there to the other side of the equation. So we're going to have x squared plus 1/2 x equals 3. Now we need to go ahead and add half the coefficient of b. We're going to take half of that, which is going to be 1/4. That's half. And we're going to square it. So we're going to add that to both sides. We're going to have x squared plus 1/2 x plus 1/4 squared gives me 1/16. And we're going to have 3 plus 1/16. So again, we can't add 3 and 1/16 as is. We need to turn 3 into a whole number over 16. So we're going to have 16. 3 times 16 is 48. Okay, so we're going to keep the left side of the equation the same. We're not going to do anything different. And this is going to become 49/16. So I'm going to X that out. So now we're going to factor it. We're going to have x plus 1/4 quantity squared is equal to 49/16. And then we're going to take the square root of both sides. And then we end up with x plus 1/4 is equal to 7/4, plus or minus. So we're going to subtract 1/4 from both sides. And that's going to give me x equals -1 plus or minus 7, all of that over 4. So I have -1 plus 7 gives me 6/4, and that's going to give me 3/2. If I have -1 minus 7, that gives me -8 divided by 4 gives me -2. And those are my answers. So let's go ahead and try one that might be a little bit easier. One more. So we have x squared minus 12x plus 20 is equal to 0. And we can see here that our b value is even. So that's going to make it much easier to do. So we don't have to do any division. It's just going to be x squared minus 12x plus 20 equals 0. And again, I want to move this 20 over to the other side. So I'm going to do that by subtracting 20 from both sides. And that gives me x squared minus 12x equals -20. So our b value is 12, -12, over 2. We're going to square that. -12/2 is -6 squared. And that's what we're going to need to do. So I'm going to add that to both sides. X squared minus 12x plus 36 equals -20 plus 36. And that's going to give me an equation of x squared minus 12x plus 36 is equal to 16. So I'm going to write it as two factors. I'm going to have x minus 6 quantity squared equals 16. We're going to take the square root of both sides. That gives me x minus 6 is equal to positive or -4. Add 6 to both sides. And then we just have x equals 4 plus 6 is 10. -4 plus 6 is 2. So those are some nice whole numbers and very easy to do. So let's look at a couple more examples. Those were the notes we took in our class. Let's look at a few more examples. So the first example I have is x squared minus 4x minus 1 equals 11. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add 1 to both sides. And that gives me x squared minus 4x equals 12. I'm going to add half of b. So my b over 2 squared, half of b is going to give me -2 over, -2 squared. So -2 squared is 4, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. and it's going to give me x squared minus 4x plus 4 is equal to 16. Rewrite that as a series of factors. X minus 2 squared equals 16. And then we take the square root of both sides. We get x minus 2 equals positive or negative 4. Add 2 to both sides. And we're left with x equals negative 4 plus 2 is negative 2. 4 plus 2 is 6. And those are our answers, negative 2 and positive 6. So our next example is 2x squared minus 4x plus 24 equals 30. First thing we're going to do is divide everything by 2 because our a value is 2. So that gives me x squared minus 2x plus 12 equals 15. I'm going to go ahead and subtract 12 from both sides. So that gives me x squared minus 2x equals 3. And I'm going to add half of b. So my b over 1 becomes negative 1, sorry, b over 2. And we square that. Negative 1 squared is positive 1. So we're going to add 1 to both sides. That gives me x squared minus 2x plus 1 equals 4. Write it as factors. X minus 1 squared equals 4. And we're going to take the square root of both sides. So you get x minus 1 equals plus or minus 2. So I'm going to add 1 to both sides. So I'm going to rewrite over here, x minus 1 equals plus or minus 2. Add 1. And I get x equals negative 2 plus 1 is negative 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. And so my answers are negative 1 and positive 3. Our next example has x squared plus 6x equals 160. So since we don't have a c term here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get our b over 2, which is 3. And then we're going to square our 3. So that gives me 9. So I'm going to add 9. And I'm going to add 9 to both sides. That gives me x squared plus 6x plus 9 equals 169. I'm going to rewrite this as a series of factors of x plus 3 squared equals 169. And then I'm going to take the square root of both sides. X plus 3 is equal to plus or minus 13. Subtract 3 from both sides. And we're finally left with, we got x equals negative 13 minus 3 is negative 16. 13 minus 3 is 10. And those are our solutions, negative 16 and positive 10. All right, our final example for this video is 2x squared plus 8x minus 8 is equal to 16. So again, first step is to divide everything by a, which in this case again is 2. So that leaves me with x squared plus 4x minus 4 equals 8. I'm going to add 4 to both sides because I need to get that 4 over to the other side. And we know it's not a perfect square trinomial already because our c term is negative, and there's no way to have a perfect square trinomial where the c term is negative. So I'm going to take my b value, which is 4, divide by 2, and that's going to be 2. 2 squared is 4, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides again. And that gives me x squared plus 4x plus 4 equals 16. Rewrite as a series of factors, x plus 2 squared equals 16. Square root of both sides. X plus 2 equals positive or negative 8. And then the next, I'm going to rewrite over here, x plus 2 equals positive or negative 8. I'm going to subtract 2 from both sides. And I'm going to have x is equal to negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10. 8 minus 2 is 6. So I would say that anytime your b value is even, completing the square is actually a quite simple way to solve quadratic functions. It doesn't work every single time. Just like any other method of solving, it's not going to work if there are no solutions. And it doesn't work quite so well when our b is not an even number, since our first step is to find half of b. So we need to make sure that that's what's going on. Like I said, you can go ahead and we said in the notes, you can solve any of them by completing the square as long as a real solution exists. But if b is even, it is always easier. That's all there is to this. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. If you want to be notified whenever I upload a new video, go ahead and like and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Have a great day. Bye.